our times, of course, as you know, the problem of child marriage, and as we discuss it, is quite centrally figured on the girl child, right? How does child marriage affect the girl child and her education, her sexual exploitation, etc.? So what was surprising to me when I started researching the Child Marriage Act of 1929, which again has mostly been written about as a problem of women's social reform, is the extent to which social reformers were concerned with the figure of the boy child. So some of the laws that preceded the Child Marriage Restraint Act of 1929, a minimum age for boys is prescribed, but no corresponding minimum age for girls. So it was these laws, but I also discovered in reading social reformist novels that often the tragic figure of the boy child who had been married off below a certain age was sort of presented as the poignant victim figure in some of these Hindi novels from the 1920s and 30s. I've read for my book medical texts to see how, outside of the domain of the law, how people were thinking of the problem of child marriage. So in medical texts and in sexological texts in particular, again, the boy was very important to the discussions. So there were discussions of how excessive sexuality harmed the vitality of the young boy/adolescent male and the harmful consequences that could therefore be seen to the national future if these boys and young men were not protected from the ravages that child marriage or youthful marriage bring. The concern was social reformist, the concern for the protection of boys. It was a nationalist concern or a racialized, highly racialized concern as to what was going to happen to the future of the race if these boys were not protected. There were concerns expressed about the education of boys, and also the health of individual boys as well was a matter of concern. What's interesting to me is to think of how even the problem of child marriage is seen as problematic, so to speak, for different reasons in the 1920s when the first sort of set of interventions to abolish it come into existence. And they are quite distinct from the way we see child marriage as a problem, in later times in the 1950s, in the 70s, and in the present.